Hi everyone, Natalie here, your friendly neighborhood birdie, and today I'm building the house of Santa Claus and his wife. And I'm doing this because of a German children's rhyme where you basically have to draw a house in one line while saying, "This is the house of Santa Claus." Well, Nikolaus, but I thought you'd be more familiar with the figure of Santa Claus. And I recorded myself doing it so you know what I'm talking about. Basically, you have to do this while saying the syllables, and it has to match what you're drawing. And if you can do this without stopping, you did it right. So I'm building a house. I'm bulldozing this lot in this beautiful neighborhood. It's actually right next to the gingerbread house I built. If you haven't seen that video, go back and watch it. It's a cute little edible house. I'll link it for you in the side here. But for this build now, we're gonna start by mapping out the floor plan. I was having kind of a vision for this house to be 2 stories high and also having a little shed, like Santa's workplace basically, where he builds the toys and stuff, but that not be in the house. And now you can see me struggle for a bit to get the floor plan done because it was really hard. I deleted quite a bit of this kind of footage because it was about, I don't know, 30 minutes of me just deleting floor plan after floor plan because I wasn't happy with it. Because this house is supposed to be very small, but also have all the necessities and enough room for all the places in the house to not only be functional, but also not to feel too crowded. But it had to be a kind of small house. I didn't want a giant house, so I kept making it smaller and smaller because I tended to build it too big. But also then questioning if this wasn't too small, if I wouldn't be running into issues all the time. And I also wanted the second floor to be smaller than the first floor, because I do kind of like the aesthetic of that a lot. And you see me struggle with that idea too in a moment. So basically that's the floor plan done. This back room there is going to be a winter garden, so it's getting a big glass door and also a glass roof, which you can't see right now. And I couldn't see either, so I was switching to the not winter Wonderland version of this. And this here is exactly what I meant by you're gonna see me struggle, because oh my god, did I struggle with the roofing of that. Nothing looked right for me, nothing looked the way I wanted it to be. And yeah, I was struggling with this a lot. I came back to this roof like 3 times before finally giving up and editing actually the floor plan of the second floor instead of the roof, because God, that roof. My misery. In general, with this build, I was kind of indecisive. So you will see me going back on things and changing things several times throughout this build because I had a kind of specific look in my mind and it was hard to get it to where I envision it to be, which is a bit of a cozy grandparents' place that's definitely Christmas vibey, but also not only, it wasn't supposed to look like a winter wonderland kind of scenery, but more like where your grandparents would live in an old house, and it was very, very Christmas and on theme. But I didn't tend to go all out Christmas at all times, except for a few items, like, for example, the columns you see me put in next. These ones, the red and white ones, totally Christmas out there, but I wanted those pieces to be accents to an otherwise pretty grandparents' house. I tried to be mismatchy at times so that things don't exactly fit, but it's just something they have accumulated throughout their very, very long life, because presumably Santa Claus is immortal. So that's basically what I was trying to find, the balance between cozy mismatch and also Christmas. One of these Christmas statement pieces is actually this one, the Christmas fireplace. I never used that in builds, but for this one it seemed adequate. And here you now can see me struggling with window placement. Nothing looked right, either from the outside or the inside. It was always looking wrong. The fireplace was very in the way because of the low wall height, but I also didn't want high walls, didn't match the vibe. So in the end, I decided to not go for windows on this wall at all and have it kind of overgrown. You see me do that later, because it's pretty typical for old houses to have those walls without windows. And I also put a window to the balcony of the upstairs bathroom, because that's another very typical thing, to have windows leading to balconies on these old places rather than doors. I'm much more happy with the layout now that it's a bit larger on the upstairs, because turns out while I was furnishing it, this was already small. It was hard to fit a bed into this and nightstands. I figured it out, but this could have definitely not been any smaller. So here you see me go back and forth on wall paint. I knew what kind of style I wanted, also given the neighborhood the building was in, but I did go back and forth on how I wanted it to look specifically, the colors, the way the woodwork was done. So you see me change my mind a lot. I'm not a very organized builder. I keep doing things spontaneously and not coming up with a plan beforehand. So things like that are just bound to happen. But in the end, I was pretty satisfied with what kind of wallpaper I chose. This little shed there is, as I said, Center's workspace, so it's supposed to look a bit more like a workspace and not like the house. Here I'm back in the Winter Wonderland because I wanted to know what the things would look like in my preferred winter vibe when I was doing the inside. So since the snow changed the lighting a bit and also just the atmosphere, I decided to go back to the live mode where it was winter. You can see me switch between the live mode and the general mode several times because it was just easier to do certain things in different modes. And what you can also see right now is me struggling with wallpaper again. As I said, it's a theme throughout this whole video that I'm very indecisive with things. And here I didn't really exactly know what was going to communicate this vibe I was going for of very cozy winter feelings and old people living here. But I also didn't want this to feel stuck up in some old-fashioned theme. Basically, old and cozy is not the same as old-fashioned to me. And Santa Claus is relatively modern, must be. He needs to keep up with the times, right? So I kept this at a balance, I hope. At least that was the plan. So I started with furnishing the living room, and here we see me building a cozy little nook. For anything really, I put a little bit of a knitting kit there and some general clutter items from our clutter kit. I wanted this to be the place where maybe Santa Claus's wife sometimes sits and just has a cozy evening. This little side table is actually a chair, which is why nothing really fits the height. But I made it work by stacking these things on top of one another. And it gives this whole thing a more lived-in vibe if you have like a mug on something and it's not just all tidy at all times. And I also decided against giving the two a television set because I didn't think that Santa Claus and his wife were watching a lot of television in my vision, at least not the version of them that I built for this here little cozy house. So I gave them an old-timey radio thing instead, and here you see me struggling putting in the tree, so I delete a wall. Initially, I wanted this to be the workspace and kind of a library space, but it had to be the Christmas tree space, or else it would have been way too crowded and uncomfortable. There's coziness in small spaces, but not if it feels like the walls are moving in on you, if you get me. So had to scrap that. But I think it made the space feel a little bit more real as well. The shape is very typical of old houses, I feel. Also the roundabout way of moving through the space feels very old-timey to me, so it made sense. While decorating the space, I tried to keep a balance between grandparent space, Christmas space, and just general comfort space. So the right rug was very important, because it could just make or break the vibe. I had a bit of a struggle finding one, and in the end, I think I ended up with the one from the Vampires pack, because it had these nice green and red colors in there. It was surprisingly hard to find good wall art, because while there are Christmas wall art thingies, a lot of them are quite kitschy, and not what I envisioned Santa Claus himself to have, more like what I envision a mall to decorate it, or maybe even a family, but not really Mr. Christmas, you know. So that was kind of hard for me. I was going back and forth on things, thinking no, probably Santa Claus wouldn't do that. These string lights, though, I ended up using in the winter garden. I think they make for quite the arrangement there. And in general, I try to keep the light mood in my mind, because that's, for me, one of the biggest parts of Christmas spirit is the right light. Everything's kind of warm and comfortable and not very cold and bright. So then I went ahead and furnished the eating space, which I had to playtest several times because it's such a small space, and I was very worried if people could still root around that. But luckily, Sims had no trouble navigating the space. And here you see me furnishing the winter garden. I wanted this to be mostly Mrs. Claus's space, as Santa has a workshop, and I felt like it felt unbalanced if I wasn't also giving his wife a space. If this is Santa Claus and his wife living there, then they both should be recognized in it in some way. So he gets a workshop, she gets a winter garden for gardening, and I think it came out quite comfortable and cozy and beautiful, and I would do some winter gardening in there. I used the curtains from the plant kit because I think they make for a great mood in a winter garden and make sense in the space, which they don't do in too many spaces, so I was quite happy. And here you see me picking out some light. At first I forgot that this thing had a glass roof, so it made no sense to have a ceiling light. But then eventually I remembered and went for a wall light. Now, it's a pretty dark space in the night, but I figured that you would mostly not go there in the night, and the dark mood in the night was actually a comfortable darkness. As I said, light is very important to me, and this kind of reduced, dimmed lighting is part of what I think about when I think Christmas, so I intentionally kept it that way. Like, that's Christmas and not an operating table, so we want mood, not brightness. And you can see me stuff this tiny room even further, but I promise you Sims can root through that, just because it felt a bit empty with just the table. So this is a furniture I had initially thought would go into the kitchen, but since this room felt like it was so empty of furniture, I found ways to stuff it in there as well, and had to shift quite a bit and test a few things out, but luckily it all worked surprisingly well. You see me do all this worrying and do I need less chairs, but no, Sims just casually root around everything in this room. Really cool. And you see me use a lot of red and green and white, classic Christmas colors, but I tried to keep it in a way that it could also potentially read just living space, and they simply like those colors. So the kitchen has got the same colors. It's the wallpaper is from the high school pack, same for the bathroom, but it was just genius how it had this accents in all the right colors, so how could I not have used it? Went for the green kitchen furniture, and then had to realize, unfortunately, that the upper cabinets are not the exact same shade of green, which annoyed me to no ends, but then I just made them red, so thanks, I guess, for the Christmas color scheme offering more than just one color, because that annoyed me. I never really noticed before how the upper cabinets look decidedly more blue, but this is not the blue swatch. They have a blue swatch, but this is the green swatch, and it still looked so very blue. And you also see me mix and match these upper cabinet. That's a tip I can give you. Like, just because the game says one is for the right end and one is for the left end and one is for a corner, doesn't mean you have to listen. Do as you please. You're the boss, especially with cheats. So I just used them the way I thought was most aesthetically pleasing in the space, and that's it. I also put in a lot of clutter because I do feel like a kitchen from especially an older couple has a lot of this and that's standing about, and it's also, you know, it's Santa Claus, so I wanted this to have stuff like tea, and they also got a marshmallow roasting kit there. It just had to look a bit wintry and comfortable and child-friendly, but I did make sure to leave them 2 free cabinets so they could cook together. It came with an update this year, I think, and it's a sweet little thing, and I can just see the 2 of them cook a nice dinner together. You know, maybe it's a bit old-fashioned, and Mrs. Claus, you know, she's the director, but he is allowed to help her stir things or cut some vegetables every now and again. I really like this idea, and it's actually something I do a lot while building, is having kind of role play elements in it so that I know for whom I'm building and how they live there. I also decided against having curtains in this room because I couldn't find any that I found suitable for the space, and I didn't really think the kitchen needed them as much as some other spaces did, so I left it. And so you see me putting a few finishing touches in here as well as light. It's a small space, intentionally small, but I do really like it. Now up to the bathroom, I kept both bathrooms similar. I just made one a shower bathroom and one a bathtub bathroom, so they could have both. And I tried to use some old-fashioned furniture, but really make sure I could utilize the space well. And since we have absolutely no shower in-game that I felt suited this aesthetic, I just used this one that you can kind of push into the wall. I wanted the bathrooms to feel practical for cleaning, but also like this has been utilized space by a couple that has been together for many, many years, and they just know their drill. They know how to utilize the space. They know where what goes. That this had to seem like a very functional space to me because I didn't think Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus would just fuss about and have a lot of dirty stuff lying around. They would probably even put away their toothbrushes in this mirror cabinet, stuff like this. It didn't feel suitable to have a lot of things lying around, but I did want them to have storage. You again see me struggle with stuff. I didn't find the perfect bathtub, but I so wanted a bathtub, so I'm here testing out every option. It couldn't be a modern one, it wouldn't at all fit the look. In the end, I'm okay with my choice. It's not the perfect choice, but again, I didn't really find anything I deemed perfect. So here we are in the entryway. This space was supposed to look very inviting and again cozy. General vibe of this whole place was supposed to be cozy, and I was keeping with the color scheme. So grandmotherly style and red, green and white and deep wood colors, and just in general, if you enter this space, you know you're welcome to stay. And I try to achieve that by giving them a lot of clutter items here and there, stuff that seems usable where they would actually store things, but also some decorations and a place to sit, just, you know, chill out, hang out. Basically communicating that you're in no rush to leave the space. You can take your time. This is a welcoming atmosphere. In real life, as well as in The Sims, I feel like entry spaces have a lot of power. They're the first thing you see when you come back home. They're the first thing your visitors see. So making this an inviting and happy space can really set the mood for the rest of the day, in my opinion at least. So that's what I'd like to reflect in this house as well. In the upper parts of the hallway space, I was putting the workspace that I had initially planned to put in this little back room that I deleted, and it fit quite well. This is where Santa Claus, I don't know, can read his naughty or nice lists, I guess. I think he updated to be on a computer, so I gave him a computer desk space. I think a lot of kids these days send emails, and here he can, you know, read them, answer them maybe. I don't know, sometimes I got letters back from Santa Claus, so I'm guessing he could answer them. And this is also where I put the house decoration thing, because no way they wouldn't have a way to decorate their house, please. And, you know, a little bookshelf for reading. This is a working space, after all. And I quite like that he doesn't have his own little space for work, because he also has already the workshop, and it feels quite fitting that they wouldn't have a designated office space, because that would probably not be a priority to them. So, kind of fitting. It's a good use of the space. Decorating wise, I was again struggling to find pictures and wall decor fitting for the Christmas but not kitsch vibe. It was really hard for me to find things. Maybe it's that we lack them, or maybe it's that this is my 4th Christmas build. Maybe it's both, but I want more Christmas decoration. And not of the kitschy kind. But in the end, I just went with wintry and cozy. I gave the room this, I don't know, fox with a scarf picture. And there was enough winter vibes then. So I was on to the bedroom. And the bedroom was again a room I struggled with a lot. It took me quite a while until I even decided on a color scheme. You see me go back and forth on this a lot. In the end, I decided to go for a kind of mix match energy of different reds and greens, because whenever I was too matchy, it felt like a bit of a designer space and absolutely not the vibe I'm going for. This has to be a space that people have lived in for decades, and it cannot be too matchy. It cannot work too well. There needs to be some slight difference in the colors or in the patterns. It needs to look intentional, yes, but not like a really designed space. And that was very hard for me to balance, especially with how oddly I shaped the room. I even contemplated going back on the shape, changing it. Ultimately decided against that, because if this is supposed to be an old building, it will have oddly shaped rooms. That's just how it is, especially since this is set in Europe and a lot of old European houses have just the wildest room shapes. It's insane. So with those room shape, I was initially thinking, hey, maybe I can go wood, and it looked pretty cool, but because of how the room was shaped, I couldn't really find a way to not do all the walls, because that was too dark. It was hard. I ultimately decided against it. It didn't work, it didn't fit. It made the whole room very dense and small and dark, and this wasn't really what I wanted. But at first I tried to make it work. I changed the color scheme to something brighter so I could add brightness. That didn't really work, so I went back on the wood idea, ultimately going for a striped wallpaper that I also changed quite a few times. I like the red stripes. It has some candy cane vibes, but not too on the nose. But then I had to change it into different shades of red for the furniture. This is what I meant when I said a bit of a mix and match, because this way it really doesn't seem like something they all bought together, like they bought the furniture the second they decided on the wallpaper. It wasn't that intentional. It just came over the years. And I don't exactly think interior design is on these two people's bucket list. They make it comfortable for themselves and pretty, but that's about it. I gave them a chess table because I put down some chess decor in the living room, and I thought, yeah, chess. They like chess. I decided they like playing chess together. It's their fun together activity, cooking and playing chess. So now you're gonna see me decorate the space a bit more and make it more lived in by giving it clutter. I was again struggling at the point where I was to put in the rug. I couldn't find a rug that was fitting for under the bed. Nothing either fit the vibe or was the right size, so I ultimately ended up doing something I sometimes do, is I was taking two small rugs and arranging them in a way that it looks like one big rug, and that was what I was ultimately pleased with. And then just, the general stuff like some curtains and some wall decor. I love these little wooden boards, and I love that they come in so many variants, so I just use them throughout the whole build at different spaces. I need more of those. In general, I also need those in non-Christmas. Well, yeah, what I mentioned earlier with the lack of Christmas decor that I can put on walls, I was struggling again here, and ultimately decided I would not only go for Christmas decor, but just general decor. They do have the 2 Christmas card thingies there, so that's gonna be enough. I was adding more details in the nature of like old people decor and just general clutter before then moving on to the space where Santa builds his toys. So off to Santa's workshop we go. Keeping true to the spirit of the rest of the video, again, I was very indecisive. I'm rearranging the space a couple of times. I wanted this to feel like a real workspace, so he has all these different workstations he needs for, he can make candles. I think he has a flower arranging table, he has a woodworking table, there is an easel for painting. In general, everything you kind of need to make toys and presents for everyone in the world, ideally. And I wanted him to have a lot of shelves in this space as well, so that he can store a lot of the toys he makes. So first layout I went for was having all the shelves on one wall and then arranging the other things on the other two walls, but it made for a terrible use of the space. There was so much emptiness in the middle and it didn't really feel good, so I decided to toss that and put everything to work in the middle to make that the working space, and then have the walls as kind of shelving units. But again, I couldn't really decide on the right kinds of shelves. I went through a few different versions before ultimately ending up just using countertops and then putting the wall shelves over those. And that was what I was really pleased with, because I went for this kind of industrial countertops, which looks like he's storing all kinds of tools in there as well. That made me happy. Everything seemed very functional, and I was then basically decorating the space with tons and tons and tons of toys and clutter items, just really making it feel like he's been hard at work already. I really enjoyed the little robot item, because that just looks like he's mid-work on those things. That's super ideal. And on the shelves, all the toys that were already finished, just ready for packaging, but also a few finished packages, just stored there. And I just basically totally cluttered the space up, because in reality the space wouldn't really be a working space. I mean, you can still use all the workstations, but there's no real need for that. So I just cluttered the hell out of all of this to make it really seem like Santa's doing something and to tell a story. I especially liked that in the debug items we also have this fire extinguisher, and I put some flammable stuff right next to it. Just for a little inside joke and storytelling. I quite like stuff like this. And yeah, as I said, I just put a shit ton of toys on the shelves and just had them stacked there. I really like the idea of this being very close to Christmas. He's already come very far with his toy making, and some things are even packaged. Maybe that's where Mrs. Claus helps. He's building, she's packaging, and it's just gonna be a cool day. It's also a lot of knitted toys, because if you remember, I put the knitting kit in the living room, so they would have that option too, and just a toy chest onto the table like that. And that was basically done. And I could move on to the outside, where I just didn't want any real Christmas theme going on. I have one tree with fairy lights on it, but aside from that, I just wanted this outside to look pretty cozy and wintry, but not Christmassy. So no outside Christmas decoration, no light up snowman, no surfing Santa, nothing like that. I kept it very centered in nature, which is why I gave them a pond and this stone path instead of a paved path. And I just wanted this to be, a nature retreat, that it's pretty in the summer and in the winter, basically. Aesthetic-wise, again, not really totally into Christmas. Aside from these path stones, I use another kind of debug stone for the flower beds. I did that in the first video I uploaded as well. Basically, in this instance, I wanted the flower beds to look like half melted snow. I try to give it this snowy form, but more subtle, because again, the idea is that it also looks good in summer. But basically, if you see the shapes I'm drawing with the stones, it's just like there was a little bit of snow lying around there, and I'm trying to mimic those shapes. And I put flower beds on the front and on the back of the house, and the flowers follow the color scheme we have for the build. I used mostly white and red flowers, and obviously the greenery is green. So we still follow this Christmas theme, but it's not completely blunt and on the nose. Additionally, the benefits of sticking with a color theme like that is that it's not looking too wild and crowded. I'm often going for an aesthetic that's very overgrown and wild because I personally like that. In this build, I didn't want that too much, so I was mostly sticking with a few kinds of plants that I was repeating throughout the front and the back, and also, as I said, with the red and the white, so it doesn't look too colorful and too wild. Essentially, this is a very intentional garden despite the varying shapes. This is all with purpose. And I put down some mushrooms and realized later on that they were pretty much gone from the build. I don't know what happened there, but they got deleted. But they were pretty when they were there, so I'm gonna put them back. The pond is a bit overgrown with animals and plants. I wanted this to be a very natural pond, maybe somewhere you can go fishing, but basically you have all this wildlife there and the greenery there, and it's a pond that's not very modern and structured and shapy, but very in tune with nature, because that's the overall theme of the garden. It's just, hey, we're happy to be here in this rural area that's very with nature, looking down upon the city. Why would we build something very constructed here? And this is my only Christmassy item, this one tree with the fairy lights. Aside from that, I went with trees that, are suitable for a winter scenery but also work in summer. I gave them the red mailbox because of course I did. And yeah, I was also decorating the trees with a few stones. I decided against using a lot of flowers outside the flower beds because it was already kind of crowded with the trees. And also, if you remember, this is our wall without the windows. I had that totally overgrown by greenery, which is something you commonly see with these types of houses. But if I had put a lot of bushes and flowers just randomly around the garden, it would have taken away from the effect of this green wall and also the flower bed. So I decided against it and just used some stones. Now, once I was happy with this wall, it was time to move on to the flower beds and put the plants in. As I said, I went with mostly the same kind of plants in all spaces, and then also with the color scheme of going with white and red flowers and obviously the green. And that worked out quite well. It is, as always with me and flowers, a slightly disorganized mess, but since I went with a color theme, it looks on purpose and it looks fitting for the overall aesthetic of the build. The wintry Christmas vibe comes through, but again, as was my plan with this house, not too on the nose, not that it looks weird and out of place in the summer or springtime or anything. It just still is a very valid and functional home, still pretty, a little bit extra maybe, and you may have to change one or two decorations inside, but overall, basically, it's fine in the summer, and that was what I was going for. After all, Santa Claus has to live someplace, even if it's not the dead of winter, right? So yeah, here you can see me use all the plants, and I really liked going with that color theme because I almost never do, at least with the plants. Some of these plants I'm pretty sure I've never used in that swatch, and that's kind of cool. And it's different from what I usually do, while still being very reasonable. Like, I didn't build something that's completely out there and weird. So I'm pleased. And yeah, it's taking a bit of time to basically fill the whole space. I didn't want any blank spots in the flower bed. I wanted this to be full and lush and serve a purpose. But as I also didn't want to go for too many plants, I stuffed some of this green bush in there a lot. And yeah, that's basically what you see me doing for the next bits, just stuffing holes in the flower beds and adding a few details here and there, such as rain drainage or more flowers, and then it's basically already time for terrain paint, and I use just a little bit in this build. I didn't go fully overboard. I used it obviously on the pond and around all structures, but I didn't really touch the grass because I think this world has pretty cool and lush grass anyway. So yeah, here's the finished build in winter time. You can see how well it blends into the surroundings and how pretty it looks in the winter. I decorated the roof of the shed a bit, and it makes a lot of sense with the white decoration over the brown wood paneling. Basically, you can tell that this house was built for winter, I think. It looks pretty with the glistening snow and the stone path. But yeah, let's go inside and check out the interior. So this is the entryway. You can see what I meant about it being welcoming and inviting, and also with the candles to give it a little bit of Christmas atmosphere. They're having a bathroom party in the downstairs bathroom, and she's breaking her back because she's old. But basically you can tell the space is actually quite a good size. It's spacey but not too large, and the colors match the overall theme. So now we go into the living room where we have our little cozy corner, and the fireplace is on at the moment, so you can hear the crackling wood, which adds to the whole atmosphere. It is Christmassy decorated, but also it's a livable space. They have the glasses on the table and all that. This is the dining room where they're apparently reading instead of on the cozy couch. But anyway, that's the kitchen. They already made themselves some tea, which is right on topic for the mood and the season. So good thing on that. It's the red cabinets with the green ones, the marshmallow station, and everything ready for them to get together and cook a bit. And before we go and see the winter garden, let's head upstairs for a bit. Let's just take the all inside spaces first. So upstairs we have our hallway, and in that the working space, it's just a desk and the little pile of boxes for decoration. And in the bedroom we have another reading corner. We have the chessboard and the bed with the 2 nightstands. It's all warm colors and cozy candles and a nice and warm feeling. And when we leave, we have the upstairs bathroom right on the other end of the hallway, basically. And this is the same as the downstairs bathroom, with the exception that the shower is a bathtub here. And as I said, this window would actually be the way to the little balcony, but it's also not really a used balcony. It's a French balcony, I think they're called. Yeah, that's the upstairs. It's a small space, but all they need. And now let's take a look at our little winter garden, so we can take this tour through the house again. And I think it quite illustrates how this is a really walkable space. I really love how the roof of the winter garden looks with the snow on top, with the glittering snow. It's very cozy. Yeah, when you leave it, you enter the dining room. I like the idea of the dining room being sandwiched between the kitchen with the kitchen smells and the winter garden with the flower smells, and then also the fireplace. It must be such a nice atmosphere. So if Santa wants to reach his workshop, he takes the little path there, and there he is. All the toys, all the workshop items are right here. He can make candles, he can do some woodwork, he can paint some pictures, he can do all the things he needs to do. The toys can be packaged up, and there's a little fan mail from the kids on the wall as well. He must get so much mail, it just makes sense that he has some up on his wall, like a proud parent or something. But yeah, that basically concludes the whole tour. I'm giving you a little overview of the scenery right here, with the city down the hill and the gingerbread house in the neighboring lot. And yeah, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you want to see the other videos of the series, go watch the playlist. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas time. I hope you do good in general if you don't celebrate. And I see you in the next one. Bye!